Shalom. First and foremost, call Halal Yamla, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahoshai, Ba'ashem HaRachak Wadash. Double honor to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders, the great millstone that I learned this truth from. And also peace and salutations to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And the title of this video is going to be, We Put Off This Life to Prepare for the Next. We the hopeful elect, the remnant, all right, those of us that have been called into this truth, hoping to be chosen, working out our salvation with fear and trembling, all right. Yahweh Shema Shai, more and more each day, as we get closer and closer to the end of Esau's world, as we get closer and closer to the return of Mashiach Yahushai. Yahweh Shema Shai is, building up the minds and the spirits of us, the hopeful elect, more and more to, put off this life, all right, to prepare ourselves for the next life, which is what? The kingdom of heaven. Ruling directly under Yahushua Mashiach as kings and priests in the next world, okay, which is going to be Jacob's world, the kingdom of heaven, which is going to be established, all right, after the end of Esau's world, okay, and what's ultimately going to officially mark the end of Esau's world, the end of Esau's blessing in his rulership, all right, the return of Mashiach Yahushua, okay, because when Yahushua comes back with the holy angels, he's coming back to, as it speaks about in Revelation the 19th chapter, he's coming back to judge and make war, okay, judge and make war with the armies of Esau, Edom, all right, the armies of this beast system, okay, the armies of Babylon the Great, America, along with their NATO and EU allies, all right, and as well, Yahushua is also going to judge and make war against the armies of all the rest of the heathen nations, okay, down in the valley of Yehoshaphat, all right, the region over there in Saudi Arabia, okay, in the midst of World War III, all right. With the return of Mashiach Yahushua with the holy angels is going to officially bring the end of Esau's world and the end of Esau's blessing, okay, to a complete end, all right, to establish the world in the blessing of Jacob, the kingdom of heaven, all right. With us, the hopeful elect, the remnant, starting with the 144,000, ruling directly under Yahushua in the kingdom of heaven as the governing body, the throne of David. See that? And we, the hopeful elect, we haste, daily, day and night for the return of Yahushua Mashiach to deliver us out of this current life, okay, this corrupted, tainted so-called life that we live, which we're really just living death, okay, we're really just slowly dying, all right, in this current so-called life, being ruled over by Esau, Edom, all right, which is doing nothing but Esau is doing nothing but continuing to destroy the air that we breathe, the water, the foods that we eat, okay, which we're really not even eating foods, all right, all we're consuming on a daily basis is just a bunch of chemicals, sugars, all right, poisons, all right, that look like food, that appear like that appears like food, all right, but it's all defiled at the end of the day, all right. All it's doing is continuing to slowly, all right, kill us daily, all right. And not only is the foods, destroying us more and more each day, but also just the everyday life here in Babylon the Great, okay, constantly, walking around on concrete, okay, working in environments where you stand on concrete, for long hours of the day, all right, in the elements, doing hard, laborers work, okay, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, all right, all to receive crumbs at the end of the day. You see that? All to receive, just enough money just to barely get by, which ultimately, for us, the hopeful elect, ultimately, as although we catch, hell within this world, and we suffer our daily affliction, but ultimately at the end of the day, we thank Yahweh Shema Shah as well, okay, for having enough to receive our daily bread, right? To have enough to where we don't have too much to where we get proud against Yahweh Shema Shah, nor do we have too little to where, we rebel against Yahweh Shem Shai. We have what is convenient for us on a daily basis. You see that? But hey, as we, the hopeful elect, grow more and more in this truth, and grow more and more in this knowledge, and grow more and more to understanding the kingdom, all right, ultimately, it grows our mindset further and further from, the cares and the affairs of this world, all right. And as the scriptures even says right here in the book of Hebrews 13 and chapter 13 verse 14, it says, "For here have we no continuing city, but we seek one to come." All right, we have no continuing city here in Babylon the Great, America. All right, as well as wherever else, the elect are scattered at throughout the four corners of the earth. All right, being ruled over by, various heathen nations. All right, throughout the earth. We have no continuing city. Meaning what? We have no hope or future. Okay, in this current world. Of course, outside of the hope of Yahweh Shem Shai in the kingdom of heaven, of course. But you look at this current world, and outside of this truth and outside of Yahweh Shem Shai, what exactly is there to hope for in this world? Okay, as this world is waxing worse and worse. Okay, this world is growing more and more demonic, more and more towards a technocracy. Okay, more and more satanic. Without this truth, what exactly will we, the hopeful elect, hope to continue for in this world? All right, everything is corrupted, tainted. Everything is fake. Right, we spend fake money. We eat fake foods. Okay, all you see is fake personalities all over the internet and all over TV. Okay, the sports are fake. The entertainment is all fake. Okay, marriage and relationships are all fake. You see that? You celebrate, fake so-called high holidays. You see that? Everything about this society is all fake, corrupted, tainted. All right, and it's all against, the natural order of Yahweh Shem Shai. So as we, the hopeful elect, why would we seek to have a continuing city or a continuing future in this current world? All right, as it says, Hebrews 13 verse 14, "For here have we no continuing city, but we seek one to come." All right, and what is the one that we seek to come? The kingdom of heaven. Okay, us being returned back to the Holy Land, the land of Israel. All right, upon the return of Mashiach Yahushai. All right, to establish, all right, the land of Israel back in order again, back to paradise again, Eden, right? And for us to be a sovereign nation. Okay, the nation of Israel, all 12 tribes, starting with the elect. Okay, we seek to be brought back to our first estate. Okay, sovereign nation, the sovereign chosen people of Yahweh Shem Shai, right? Ruling as kings and priests on the earth once again. But this time we seek to obtain that glory once again, this time in perfection, via new bodies, right? Incorruptible, indestructible, fashioned like unto Yahweh Shai's body, right? As sons and daughters of God, of the Heavenly Father Yahweh, right? Via the new covenant, okay, with the laws and the commandments written out in parts, programmed to be righteous in the eyes of the Heavenly Father Yahweh again through Yahweh Shai, okay, and to be joined back with our power Yahweh again via a new covenant, via a new marriage, okay, which is only for Israelites at the end of the day. No heathen nation will be under the new covenant, okay. No heathen nation will have the laws and the commandments written in inward parts, nor will any heathen receive new bodies. Okay, that is only all for the Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, starting with the elect, point blank period. See that? I want to read this in the NLT, Hebrews 13 verse 14 in the NLT. "For this world is not our permanent home." Okay, we're only pilgrims in this world, right? We are looking forward to a home yet to come. Okay, and that's the kingdom. We're looking forward to the kingdom. Okay, we put off this life, right? We put off the cares in the affairs of this world that distract us from the truth. Okay, to prepare ourselves for the next life to come. Okay, which is the kingdom. Now, of course, as we put off the cares and the affairs of this world, right? Now, does that mean, we live our lives, just being a bunch of bums, living off the streets, right? Poor, destitute, don't take care of our family, don't take care of our children, don't, take care of our, business and pay our bills and keep a roof over our head and all these things that, because we put off the cares and the affairs of this life. Does that mean that we put off all those said things as well? No. We take care of our business in the world. We take care of our families and loved ones in this world and whatnot. All right, but ultimately, we don't look at the things of this current world as the end all be all of life. All right, because ultimately, our main priority at the end of the day is the truth. Okay, this gospel of Yahweh Shemashai and the kingdom. Okay, because as a matter of fact, what did Yahweh tell us? Okay, what did Yahweh command us in Matthew the 6th chapter and verse 33? Okay, Matthew 6 and 33, this Yahweh is speaking. He says, "But seek ye first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." All right, and this is pretty much a commandment given to us by Yahweh. Seek ye first the kingdom of Yahweh. All right, the kingdom of heaven, which is going to be established on earth. All right, and his righteousness. What is the righteousness of the Heavenly Father Yahweh? Ultimately, faith in Hamashiach Yahushua, right? And as well, keeping the laws to the best of our ability through faith in Yahushua. Making our bodies a living sacrifice, renewing our minds from the ways of this world. Okay, working out our salvation with fear and trembling, doing this work. Doing these lessons and these videos, feeding the Lord's sheep, the elect, going out on the highways and the byways, and making ourselves fools for Hamashiach's sake. Okay, pleasing Yahweh Shemashai through the preaching of the word, as it speaks of in 1 Corinthians, the 1st chapter, right? We do all these things to seek first and foremost the kingdom of heaven. All right, and matter of fact, Matthew 6 and 33 in the NLT, seek the kingdom of Yahweh, the kingdom of heaven, right, above all else, and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. Okay, everything we need in regards to salvation. Because of course, the Lord's not going to give us everything, that we need or want in this world in the form of, millions of dollars. Okay, a big house, a nice car, okay, material things. No, the Lord only gives us everything that we need, okay, that's convenient for us to, all right, serve him, okay, preach his word, do his work, all right, and ultimately make sure that we have enough to endure to the end, okay, to live to see our Lord Yahweh Shai, make his glorious return to deliver us, the hopeful elect, out of this current world. Lord will not be able to number. You see that? So again, Matthew 6 and 33 in the NLT, Yahweh Shai is speaking. He says, "Seek the kingdom of Yahweh, Ba'ashim Shai, the kingdom of heaven, above all else, and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need." See that? So above all else in this world, we, the hopeful elect, we seek the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Yahweh Ba'ashim Shai, that is going to be established on the earth, all right, above anything in this world. Okay, we put off this current world, and we put off the fashion of this current world that's fading away, as it speaks of in 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter. All right, and we prepare ourselves for the next life and the next world to come, which is Jacob's world, the kingdom of heaven. All right, and I want to get this. Okay, Matthew 16 and verse 25, Yahushua is speaking again. He says, "For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. Yeah. And as this current world is going down and ultimately going towards World War, right? World War III, okay, the Battle of Armageddon, right? As Esau's world is crumbling more and more every day, Babylon the Great has fallen and crumbling more and more financially. Okay, the dollar is losing its influence throughout the earth, as you have many countries throughout the earth now finding ways, okay, to trade and do business outside of the dollar, right? And not to mention, you have the U.S. military pretty much getting embarrassed by Iran, okay, in West Asia, what Esau calls the so-called Middle East, all right. And on top of that, you have war brewing up here on the shores of Babylon the Great America, okay, civil war and sedition, as you have division all over the place here in America, political division between the left and the right, okay, more division between men and women in this country, okay, division between the rich and the poor, and as well the division between nations, okay, so-called, different so-called races of people here in Babylon the Great America, Jake versus Esau, Esau versus Moab, okay, Esau versus Ishmael, so-called Arabs, okay. Babylon the Great America is crumbling more and more and circling the drain, as George Carlin said years ago in a stand-up. All right, you clearly see, or at least we, the hopeful elect, clearly see more than ever that the so-called American dream is pretty much dead. Right, people are losing jobs left and right due to AI, taking over jobs. Okay, all kinds of businesses and restaurants are closing down all across America, right? Whether it be fast food restaurants, okay, beloved, so-called beloved restaurants across America, okay, malls closing down, all right, different factories and different factories and whatnot closing down, okay, food processing plants and factories being burned down and destroyed, all right. Everything across the Babylon the Great America, including the so-called American dream, is all circling the drain, okay. But yet, still to this day, you still have 2/3 of our people in their simplicity, their ignorance, and their spiritual blindness and their spiritual complacency, still looking to save their life, all right, in this current system. Jake is still running around chasing a bag. Okay, Jake is still selling out. Okay, Jake is still, still looking back. All right, and real quick, as Scripture speaks about in the book of Hebrews, about looking back. Okay, Hebrews 10 and verse 39, it says, "But we are not of them who draw back unto perdition, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul." Right? And we, the hopeful elect, we're the ones that believe to the saving of the soul. Right? And as it went into the first part of that verse, it says, "And we're not of them who draw back unto perdition." Okay? Jake in this world that's selling out, okay, chasing the bag, as well as, Jake within his Israelite ministry that's selling out, taking a 501c3, taking a bag, going off on a doctrine, right? Becoming apostate. We, the hopeful elect, right? The faithful, hopeful elect, we're not drawn back and looking back into this world, because all there is to look for in this world is, as it said, perdition. Okay, and what does the word perdition mean? All right, the word perdition is Strong's G 684. Apolia, and it means destroying, utter destruction. Hey, this world, especially Babylon the Great America, is all being led to utter destruction. You see that? A perishing, ruin, destruction. And then it says of money. Okay, and we definitely see the money system here in America going down. All right, the dollar is collapsing. The dollar is losing its influence throughout the world. Okay, And not to mention, we see the cost of living going up more and more due to these, these tariffs. All right, inflation. Okay, and not to mention, the price of gas going up due to the, Strait of Hormuz being closed off. Right. This current world, especially here in Babylon the Great America, it's all being led to perdition. So for those of our people that's still trying to save their life in this current world, in this current system, and as well looking back, the only thing you're looking back to and going in, striving towards is nothing but perdition. You see that? You're striving towards perdition. Okay, you're trying to make it and trying to stay afloat in a world that's a system that's getting ready to be destroyed by Yahweh Shemal Shai via prophecy. You see that? But we, the hopeful elect, as it said again, Hebrews 10:39, but we are not of them who draw back unto perdition, but of them that believe to the saving of the soul. Yeah, we, the hopeful elect, we're the ones who believe, okay, in the next life or the next world to come after this, which again is what? The kingdom of heaven, Jacob's world, okay, the throne of David, the return of Hamashiach Yahushai. All right, that's the life and that's the world that we're preparing for. Okay, and mind you, with us, the hopeful elect, developing a mindset of putting off this life, all right, to prepare ourselves for the next world to come. Hey, that's also a sacrifice. That's also the mindset of a sacrifice. Because we're sacrificing any and every opportunity that we may have in this world to, so say, make it, right, to gain fame, fortune, right, or whatever the case may be, right. We're sacrificing any chance or opportunity that we may have or can get to so say make it in this world, to make it into the kingdom. You see that? And you best believe, okay, that's a sacrifice, all right, that's going to be accepted, by Yahweh Shemal Shai. Of course, as long as we remain faithful, okay, remain diligent, remain sincere, remain in our right state of mind, okay, as we continue to see this world crumbling, as long as we maintain the faith and the fear of the Lord Yahweh Shemal Shai, as we continue to put off this world and sacrifice this world for the next life, okay, you best believe that's going to be a sacrifice that's going to get us accepted to Yahweh Shemal Shai. You see that? Matter of fact, let me get this as well. This is Yahweh Shai speaking again. This is the book of John, chapter 12 and verse 25. He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. See that? So those of our people that love their lives in this world, okay, they're corrupted, tainted lives in this world, they're going to lose it, okay, because many of our people are going to end up taking that charagma to try to save their life and try to preserve their life, their love of this current life, right? And they're going to end up losing it. See that? And as Yahushua said, and he that loveth his life, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. Yeah, and that's us, the hopeful elect. We hate our lives in this world, and even as it speaks of in the book of Revelation, the 12th chapter, we love not our lives unto the death. Okay, because again, as Jake in his world, 2/3 of our people are still looking to so say make it in this world and chasing a bag and getting all kinds of fame and attention and fortune in this world, right? Traveling all to and fro throughout the earth, living that so-called best life. Many of our people, okay, especially those of us, whether it be family members, okay, people that we know in the world and whatnot, right? They look at us and they look at the lives that we're living, okay, and people that we know in this world, act as if because we're not, trying to, be happy in this world and travel and do this, that, and the third, they pretend as if we're missing out on something in this world. Okay, mind you, this world is ran by, the wicked, the children of Satan, Esau, Edom, starting with his top elite banking families, all right, the small hats, Amalek, which are, being found out more to be nothing but a bunch of Satanists, right? PDF files, okay, just complete, demons ruling the earth, right? Destroying the food, destroying the air, destroying music, destroying family, destroying lives, okay, destroying the animals, destroying nature, okay, and on top of that, bringing the whole entire world on the brink of war, right? So, as we, the hopeful elect, okay, we're not missing out on absolutely anything in this current world because everything in this world is all being more and more tainted, corrupted, and destroyed, okay? So the 2/3 of our people, in their simplicity, all right, as they look at us and think that we're, somehow missing out on something in this world or missing out on, so-called opportunities in life, all right, ultimately, it's because what? That 2/3 of our people love their lives in this world. Okay, they enjoy being ruled over and being at the bottom. So therefore, what? Many of they're going to lose their so-called lives in this world. Okay, because the Lord ultimately didn't create our nation, all right, Israelites, to be at the bottom. He ultimately created us to be at the top, above all nations and blessed. You see that? And that's why we, the hopeful elect, that's why, we hate our lives more and more as this current world is coming to an end. Because we're understanding more and more, right, that we should be at the top, that we should be ruling over the earth, okay, as sons of God, under the Son of the Most High God, Yahweh Shai, right, through this wisdom, this knowledge, and understanding, okay, and so, as we hate our lives more and more, we're willing more and more, right, through faith, to lose our lives in this current world, okay, to gain the next life to come after, which is the kingdom of heaven. You see that? Matter of fact, I also want to get this. This is 2nd Ezra, chapter 8 and verse 1. It says, and he answered me, saying, the Most High hath made this world for many, but the world to come for few. Yeah. So these people in the world, including 2/3 of our people, right? Including, family members and, people you may know in the world. Hey, if they love this world, okay, and they enjoy their so-called lives in this world, and they're looking for a future in this current world, and looking to do, this, that, and the third within the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. Hey, let them have it. Let these people have this world, all right, and all the corruption and a BS that's in this world, and ultimately let them have the missiles that's getting ready to come to this current society, especially here in Babylon the Great America, because we know, all right, that there's a world coming after this, which is Jacob's world, which as it read, but the world to come for few. Okay, the next world is only going to be, okay, for the for the prosperity, okay, of a few. See that? And that's, Yahweh Shai and the nation of Israel, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, starting with us, the hopeful elect, okay, that are putting up this world, okay, to prepare for the world to come after, right, the kingdom of heaven. All right. And I want to end it off on this right here in the previous chapter. This is 2nd Ezra chapter 7, in verse 42. It says, he answered me and said, this present life, all right, this present life is not the end where much glory doth abide. Okay, this current life that we're so-called living in right now, all right, in Babylon the Great America, as well as wherever else our people are scattered at throughout the four corners of the earth, all right, this current so-called life, this current world that's ran by Esau, Edom, is not the end-all be-all of life on earth. This is not the end-all be-all of glory on earth, okay? because according to prophecy, according to the scriptures, there's another glory coming after this, which is the glory of Jacob. All right, Yahweh Shai, the 144,000, the rest of the large multitude, 1/3 remnant elect. All right, and then as well, the rest of our people after that. Okay, there's another glory coming after the so-called glory of this world, which, mind you, right now this is shameful, spewing all over Esau's glory. You see that? There's a shameful spewing all over Esau's current glory, right? Because Esau's world is coming to an end, and Jacob's world is coming right after. See that? And that's the world in the life that we, the hopeful elect, are preparing for. Okay, via working out our salvation with fear and trembling, and calling on the name of Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai. All right. 2nd Ezra 7:42 again. He answered me and said, this present life is not the end where much glory doth abide. Therefore have they prayed for the weak. Okay. And so, so with that, Lord willing, this video is edifying. And until next time, Shalom.